Hi crowd, my name is Cosmin, and for the past 2 years I worked at MHP as a junior consultant, and together with my team, we currently face a lot of challenges of building APIs, but also consuming them. So in the theme of developer happiness, I would like to talk about how to optimize your APIs for consumers. But first, let's start with an API, with GraphQL. Let's start with an API. And more specifically, let's start with REST APIs. Who here can tell me if they've wrote code consuming a REST API? Like someone? Anyone? Good, good. Okay. How about on the other side? Did you wrote code of constructing a REST API? Again, someone? Anyone? Great. Nice job. Also, have you heard of GraphQL? Also with a show of hand. Most impressive, most impressive. So throughout today's talk, I would like to base my examples on this particular API. It's a public API that exposes to us Star Wars characters, location, planets, films, so on and so forth. Maybe to get a better overview of how to consume certain APIs. So if we analyze, let's say, a request, the first part of a request is also the verb, which describes the operation that we want to execute on the server. And the second part is a unique identifier named endpoint that should give us what we want as clients. And if we want to consume the previous request, we get a response in the form of JSON. Which return to us a certain number of resources. And if we look again at our request, we can see that it gives us fairly simple data to work with, like the name of the character, height, mass. These are called fields or attributes. But also, they give us something that we don't quite understand. These fields are called metadata, and they are machine-readable endpoints to other resources that we want to achieve, we want to create, to get. And if we want to follow that one metadata, let's say we want to get the planet of a certain character that was returned earlier. We follow it, and again, we get more resources to work with. And also the previous request gave us films. Again, we follow a certain endpoint and get more and more resources. So let's say to get the whole picture of a character, we need to make multiple requests in different places to get the full picture of the details of our character. And this can become a little bit tiresome, cumbersome, and also quite hard on our mobile devices, where we have slow connectivity, bad reception, so on and so forth. So to summarize a bit, RESTful APIs are optimized around servers, not around clients, because they are constructed around the resources that they give, or you can modify them. And this is a great thing about REST APIs. It's like one of their most important features. They are generalized enough to be consumed by almost any client. But what if we want to put clients first? And this question is addressed to you, the people that constructed REST APIs in the past. One particular technique that was popularized by Netflix is called backends for frontends, where basically what we want to do is have each and every one of our devices connect to a certain endpoint, be it desktop, mobile, or even your smart fridge at home. This seems like a good opportunity to handle different types of requests made by the clients. But we encountered certain problems. Let's say your new shiny smart TV at home comes with the next version of Netflix. The older smart TVs, the old smart TV that you replaced, has the old version of Netflix, and you want to sell it on OLX. Well, the person that buys it from OLX remains to consume some old version of the Netflix API that we, with our new shiny TV, have access to. So we do a disservice to our old clients. And this only works when you're in full control of your client's need for data. You know its needs, and you can adjust your endpoints accordingly. But what about a public API, a GitHub API, an API like I found with the Star Wars characters? Well, in that case, we have no idea when we design our API what are the needs of our clients. So here enters GraphQL. GraphQL is basically a data query language. Think of SQL, the lowest common denominator between technologies like MySQL, SQL Server, so on and so forth. And don't think of it as a place to store your data, but like a runtime layer for our applications. GraphQL is also a specification. GraphQL is a query language specification because it was implemented in several different languages such as Ruby, JavaScript, Java, and it first appeared as a product of Facebook. They identified the need for their mobile clients to ask for different type of resources in a dynamic way. And they came up with this solution. So this is our first hello world into the GraphQL query specification. We see on the first bat that it resembles JSON, and this was intentional. We can see that we want to request from our GraphQL server the current authenticated user, me, and get its first name, last name, and email. And let's see if we execute it against a server. Right off the bat, we see it's JSON, but without the values. Again, so this is a really important feature of GraphQL. It enables us to define what we expect from the server. So no need to introspect the server beforehand when we want to make a request. So let's talk about some features of the query language. And the first feature that I identified is GraphQL is typed. What does this mean? If we look again at our hello world query, we can see that behind the scenes, it has something called a schema. A schema is like the database schema that describes our tables. But instead of describing the tables from our API, we describe what can the clients get by querying our endpoint. And we can see here, the root query returns me, that is a type of user. And the type of user gets us the first name, last name, and email, both of which, all of them which are primitives. So that's okay and all, but we can get a little bit more in depth of how we can query a GraphQL endpoint and see what are the differences with the REST one. So for this one, I would like to try, whoops. I would like to try and do just a quick demo. Whoops. So I think this is a normal React app. And let's say that we want to interrogate, to query our endpoint using GraphQL. First point. Acum, stai. Okay, cool. Okay. So let's try and initialize a GraphQL client. We will use the Apollo client. We will import it. And also define what we want to obtain from that GraphQL client. Let's say that we want to obtain the name, birth year, height, the films that he played in, and the planets. So using a lifecycle hook from React, we will have a method called getCharacterData. And here we can see how a query executed on the front end could look like. So we have the person, the thing that we want to interrogate, and here we describe what we want from him. Let's adjust the render method. Save, and pray to God that it works. Currently, I've gotten the character Luke Skywalker using the using that public API, but we've queried it with GraphQL. Okay, sorry for the short demo, and come to see it as a conclusion, not a fall anymore. What I wanted to identify with the short demo is that we can ask multiple resources in just one round trip. As you saw in the GraphQL query that I've made, we've asked for the characters data, and also the film data, but also the home data. So in contrast to what we would do with a classic REST API, like doing multiple requests, or in contrast with the Netflix approach of having dedicated endpoints for each device, now we can have only one endpoint that we can query with almost whatever we want. Thank you.
Întrebări dacă aveți? Spune unde ai folosit GraphQL în proiectele tale? În ce context?
În proiectele personale am reușit să-l folosesc pentru a reduce the dreadful promise then, promise then, promise then. E un mod elegant de a obține mai multe resurse într-un singur loc. Și, de exemplu, am folosit pentru a construi o mică aplicație de a consuma API-ul public de la GitHub, care acum au trecut full-on pe GraphQL și încearcă să nu mai suporte API-ul lor de REST.
Interesant. Și îți dă acces la ce ai făcut? Adică acum mi-am făcut curios. Ce face aplicația?
Basically, putem să interogăm datele despre repozitoriile noastre sau cele care sunt expuse public și date despre ce au făcut userii pe GitHub, so on and so forth. Cumva un fel de mix social network cu chestia asta. și nu era necesar în prealabil să mergem prin toată documentația GitHub pentru a vedea ce face fiecare endpoint în parte, ci puteam să interogăm folosind un GraphQL query. Să zicem ce putem noi să obținem. Și toată documentația lor a putut să fie condensată aproape într-o singură pagină.
Interesant. Bun. Mai aveți întrebări din sală sau continuăm? Bun. Mulțumim, Cosmin.
Okay.